Hi, and thanks for joining us for another video in the How It Works series. I'm your host, Glen Whitten, and today we're breaking down some of the flaws with the traditional real estate model. Our firm is built around addressing each of these shortcomings. So as we reveal each flaw, we'll also reveal our solution to correct it. Way back in 2002, a few years into my career at RE/MAX, I was having lunch with a regular client of mine. Between bites of salad, he asked me a question that really caught me off guard. What he said was, Glenn, if I sell my $300,000 house with you, you're going to charge me 6%, aka $18,000. But if someone else sells a house with you that only costs $150,000, they're only going to pay $9,000. So what am I getting for the extra $9,000? While the question caught me off guard, it also opened my eyes to the biggest flaw in the traditional real estate model, the 6% commission. If he was asking, odds are lots of people were asking. And if I had no answer, it was time to look for one. So instead of becoming an obstacle that I had to overcome in my presentation, this became the basis for a new concept and eventually a brand new brokerage. And that's exactly what happened. In 2003, we opened the Ohio Property Group with the goal of separating ourselves from the pack. We did it by identifying the flaws in the traditional real estate model and then building our system as a solution. And it worked. Here we are, 20 years later, still building those solutions. As you've probably guessed, the biggest flaw then and now with the traditional real estate model is the 6% commission. But in order to understand the depth of this flaw, you need to know how realtors typically get paid. In the traditional model, if someone wants to sell their house, they usually hire a listing agent. If and when the house sells, the seller pays 6% of the sales price to their realtor at closing. If the buyer has their own agent, the listing agent splits the commission with each agent keeping around 3%. But if the buyer doesn't have an agent, the listing agent keeps the entire 6%. That happens about 20% of the time. Traditional agents call that a good day at the office. Now, let's talk about the first issue with the 6% commission. It's just too much. In real dollars, if you sell a $300,000 house, which is about the average for this area, you're going to pay $18,000 to the listing agent at closing. I'm here to tell you, after 2 decades and thousands of transactions, $18,000 to sell a house is just too much. But you already know that. As I mentioned, about 80% of listings are sold by a different agent or a buyer's agent. That means that on a $300,000 home, sellers are paying $9,000 to a listing agent whose entire to-do list consists of helping with pricing, putting up a sign, adding the property to the MLS, and waiting for an offer. Sometimes the listing agent will also hold an open house. Dress it up all you like, but there it is. In the past, home prices were much lower and listing agents had to spend real money on print advertising. But thanks to the internet and inflation, everything has changed. Today, there's just not that much that a listing agent can spend their time or money doing. But they still charge 6% anyway. Why? Well, I don't really know why. Probably because they can. Look, I don't know what you do for a living, but I want you to ask yourself, how many hours would you have to spend working to collect an $18,000 check? In our experience, a listing agent these days spends about 10 hours on a listing. But let's say they double that and spend 20 hours on your listing. The hourly rate still seems pretty high. The second problem with the 6% model is that it makes no sense to base your fees entirely on the price of the home. As my lunch date pointed out, sellers end up paying vastly different amounts for the exact same set of services. That doesn't seem fair. Selling a more expensive home doesn't cost more. In fact, you could almost argue that selling a more expensive home is less work. The sign costs the same, the marketing, the paperwork, the advice, they all cost exactly the same. And trust me when I tell you, It does not take 10 times the work to sell a $1 million home than it does a $100,000 home. The third problem with the 6% commission model is that it's paid at closing. Now, I get that at first glance, this might seem like a good thing, but having a commission tied to a closing potentially pits the seller's interest against the agent's desire or maybe need to get paid. As a seller, you're paying for advice. You don't want to set up an issue where that advice could potentially be tainted by the agent's agenda. For example, what if the best advice is to walk away from the deal? Can you guarantee me that every agent in every situation who's got a commission coming at closing is going to give that advice? It makes you wonder. Now we've highlighted the three biggest issues with the 6% flaw. It's too high, it's unfair, and it potentially creates a conflict of interest between agent and client. So, what's our solution? Welcome to the first pillar in our system, the flat fee. Instead of charging sellers a 6% commission at closing, we charge sellers a low flat fee at the outset of the process. If you compare our flat fee to the traditional model, you'll see that it solves all three issues that we covered today. 1, it's lower. Our fees are 40 to 90% less than what you'd pay a traditional agent for the same services. 2, it's fair. We charge sellers the same fees for the same services, regardless of the price of the home. 3, it's upfront, no surprises, and our sellers never worry about our agenda. With one simple, powerful shift, we eliminated 3 issues. This begs the question, why would a seller ever agree to pay a 6% commission instead of our flat fee? Well, usually it's because they don't know about it or they don't understand it. Many of our clients tell us that they'd never even heard of anything like this until somebody else told them about it. If you want to know how much money you can save by listing with us, or more importantly, how much money you'll have after closing, head over to www.ohionetsheet.com and request our free seller net sheet. It's an estimate of the closing costs and so forth that you'll have at closing so that you know what you're going to walk away with after the sale. Just tell us a couple of pieces of information about the property and we'll send it right over. That's www.ohionetsheet.com. In the next video, we'll tackle another flaw in the traditional model. It's what we call the one-size-fits-all service approach that traditional agents tend to take with their clients. Be sure to check out the other videos in the How It Works series, and when you're ready, click on the Get Started link, or take advantage of the many free tools we offer, such as quizzes, checklists, home value reports, and much more, all so you can get to know us first. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We look forward to working with you, and remember, you can sell it.